Are you looking for the best digital Fujifilm cameras? In this video we will look at some of the 5 best digital Fujifilm cameras on the market. Before we get started with our video, we have included links in the description. So make sure you check those out to see which one is in your budget range. Starting at number 1. Fujifilm X-T4, Best Fujifilm Camera for Video. I have spent many years in photography, but the boost it got in the last 5 years is exceptional. Introducing new photography techniques made the need for more powerful lenses inevitable. However, the camera specs sometimes need to be more manageable and understandable by a layman or aspirant photographer. For that reason, I started my review channel to make the workings of the camera easy to comprehend. My videos have become very high quality, so I get this question about what camera I use for shooting a lot. I have utilized many devices, most of which were Fujifilm. Recently, I started using Fujifilm X-T4. If you ask me about the best Fujifilm camera for video, short documentaries, and vlogs, then T4 would top the list. Although I have bought this camera specifically for videos, I have also worked on some photography-related projects, and being a professional cam, it brings life to my clicks. I have captured some photos with motion blur and freezing effect and used ISO increase to brighten the night city photo from uphill. For motion blur, I kept the shutter speed to 1/100. To freeze the motion of a butterfly from my garden, I used a faster shutter speed of about January 1900, and to brighten the photo I took at night, I increased the ISO to 700. As in video making, there is more control over the aperture than over shutter speed because frame rates determine it, so I adjust the aperture to my needs while making videos. Number 2. Fujifilm X-S10, Best Fujifilm Cameras for Beginners. The photography and videography industry feels saturated with too many people trying to make the best of it. As the competition gains momentum, the need for more perfect images and video production also increases. Therefore, novice photographers always look for a camera to put them at the top of the field. My cousin is one of those aspirant photographers and just took his first step in this field by getting admission to media studies. He asked me to help him with an exemplary device for his work, so I gifted him my own Fujifilm X-S10, which I found very convenient to use and might help him handle the shortcomings that beginners always make. The camera has an ISO range from 160 to 12,800, but it's not the end ISO that can be extended up to 51,200, giving my cousin the flexibility to shoot in a low-light environment. However, I warned him to use only a little higher ISO to avoid image noise. The shutter speed controls both the still image motion and brightness, and I told him to go for a lower ISO while shooting at a slow shutter speed, such as 1/250 seconds. Learning to control the white balance can be a little overwhelming for beginners, so I asked my cousin to remember that the light mode does not feel right with the auto white balance setting. Number 3. Fujifilm X-H2, Best Fujifilm Camera Mirrorless. Mirrorless cameras are state-of-the-art beats in more progressive photography. Since the high production rate in the photo industry, I have replaced my DSLR with a mirrorless camera for many reasons. I have always faced an issue with the camera handling as it introduces unnecessary image shaking, which costs some of my terrific pieces. Moreover, the mirrorless camera claimed to be faster, so I decided to replace my DSLR with it. I was thrilled when I started getting the outcome. A few weeks ago, I updated my previous device with Fujifilm X-H2, the best Fujifilm mirrorless camera. With H2, I recently entered a photography competition where I presented one of the Flying Eagle's pictures I captured by freezing the eagle by introducing ISO at 800 in January 2000 shutter speed. Moreover, the best advice to keep the motion blur in a photograph is to slow down the shutter speed while keeping the ISO at its face range. Taking about the aperture and depth of field is very intricate, but for an overview, I would like to mention some basic settings I use for the gap. Number 4. Fujifilm GFX 100S, Best Fujifilm Camera for Portraits. My firm has dealings with multiple high-profile people around the country as we manage the social media cell of a non-profit news website. I deal as the head of the photography department, and wherever there is a news or charity drive, I cover the events to take pictures for the website. I mostly use portrait mode for capturing the shots because it is a more focused type of image, making the artistic sense of the picture is taken. I use Fujifilm GFX 100S, a higher rating among the best Fujifilm cameras for portraits. The most effective portrait photograph needs a grasp of subtle camera techniques and specs to get the perfect front page shot. In portrait photography, when I use manual mode, I set the ISO to the base, as in the case of this camera, to 100 to 200. The ISO may brighten the photo, but it also introduces image noise. I try to keep the ISO in the normal range to avoid this. The shutter speed when clicking portraits needs to be fast. It may introduce a shake if it's slow, and the subject might move. Gaps are most important when it comes to portrait making. I sometimes work with aperture priority mode that permits the camera to select the aperture and then set the ISO at last. The shutter gets adjusted according to the ambient light. However, when I work with manual mode, I put the aperture to f/2.8 f/4 to get a smooth bokeh and prime focus on the subject. The bokeh is the background blur that can be achieved by shallow depth of field, and it's a norm in portrait photography. White balance choices are vast and depend on the surrounding temperature and light. Number 5. Fujifilm X-H2S, best Fujifilm camera for sports. I just came from a football match where I was assigned to capture the thrilling championship. I went there with my Fujifilm X-H2S, which I had just started using as an alternative to my previous one. It's been my first time using a Fujifilm product, but talking about the specifics, I like the turnout I got with this camera during the matches. Sports photography is actionable, and much motion is involved, so I had to be focused on my camera to capture the exactness of the scenes. Moreover, my camera's processor was fast enough to instantly process videos and images, making it the best Fujifilm camera for sports. To preserve the snappy moves of the players, I needed to introduce motion blur and freezing. The common fact of capturing motion in stills is adjusting the shutter speed. So, where I chose a faster shutter speed, I also increased the ISO to gain enough light, and where I slowed down the shutter, I also used the ISO to essential value to avoid the chances of image noise. The depth of sports photography depends on what is being captured. When I was capturing the ground and the players during the match, I kept the area deep to include the background, and I did so by maintaining the aperture to f/4.